Hello and welcome to the Outcomes Over Hours show. I'm Tina Patterson and my guest today has got a wealth of experience to share with you. So I'm excited to jump in. I'm here today with Abhi Dhar, and Abhi has held Chief Information Officer, Chief Technology Officer and Chief Digital Officer roles, and most recently was the Chief Information Technology Officer at TransUnion. His experience is deep and it ranges from Fortune 50 companies through to founding startups, particularly in the technology space. And why I particularly wanted Abhi on the show was when my team came across what he'd spoken about in an interview with CIO.com. And I'm going to read what he had said. He said, "The most satisfying moments of my career have revolved around the creation of innovative new offerings, operational excellence, something I love, great financial discipline, and developing high-performance teams who deliver expectation-defying results." So Abhi, welcome to the Outcomes Over Hours show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor.
Oh, well, what a wealth of experience. And I'd love to start with your leadership style itself. And can you share how has your leadership style evolved throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to that phrase, when I said expectation defying results, I was really referring to the expectations that the collective, us, me, my team set for ourselves. And it was almost that our expectations were almost too low. We went beyond what we even expected to do. And that gave me, along with everybody I worked with, so much joy. And that sort of became the feeling that I've chased in my entire career. And my leadership style, there was the before times where we had a very established leadership manifesto, how do you do things, etc. And we had grown, a generation had grown up with those. And then we have the now times. And the way I like to characterize it is that, today, people with 3 to 4 years experience, which is really the backbone of a lot of companies, people with 3-4 years experience, graduated in isolation during the pandemic. They worked the bulk of their career remotely and are now contemplating this feeling from corporate executives of a nostalgia that they don't share. They don't understand, what do you mean by going back to the office? They've never been to the office. You're making them go to the office for the first time. And that's sort of affected my leadership behavior. I started off as an engineering manager. For me, the most important thing was good engineering. And slowly what I've realized is that everybody, an engineer, an illustrator, an operational person, a welder, they're all human. And they acquire these skills to pursue a means of living so that they can live as human beings. And somewhere along the way, in the before times, we lost that. We flipped it. Yeah. We became a welder who had a family as opposed to a family man who was a welder. And so I think what has happened for my leadership style over the period of time is I've realized that if you can get people to join up on a mission and to believe in a cause that is bigger than what they just do and get paid for, they collectively and individually will do great things that will surprise everybody, including themselves. And what I'm describing to you is a very hard thing to do. But most worthwhile things are hard. And so that's
Absolutely.
What I do.
What practical advice would you give for leaders who are looking to do that, who go, yeah, that makes sense. Where on earth do I start? How practically do you do that?
So 3 things in terms of the leadership style. I kind of went in a tangent and maybe I'll answer with 3 things. One is, I changed many unconscious and many conscious behaviors that were based on proximity. It was normal for us to, after we did something, to go have a team outing, a picnic in the summer. Town halls, they were the most common ritual of bringing a subunit or the entire company together. And all of that to build a sense of tribe. And well, that doesn't work anymore as well. And not everybody shows up. So it doesn't have the effect of building a tribe. And it feels corporate and contrived and sort of almost becomes anti-tribe, right? And what has also happened, like you and I are talking right now, I'm looking at your living room, you're looking at my office, it's become very intimate. We're now inside people's homes. And in the before times, I used to separate my professional life from my personal life. How I presented in a corporate environment was very different than how I was in a non-corporate environment. But now it's very hard. And it was an affectation that we had learned from the old sort of canon of business, be this way. The way you dress is the way you're going to show up, and all of those axioms that we read. It's changed. I mean, we've seen people go through tragedy through Zoom. It's very different. So I sort of separated it a little bit. I think I've become more, I was always authentic, but now I've become more intimate, more open about what my beliefs are, how I live, etc. And so have people. And then meetings really suck. They really, really suck. And so, I've started to change things, right? So for example, rather than have an update meeting for every project, maybe we just have one update day, right? Like a monthly management meeting, you look at all of your operational metrics, all of your delivery metrics, financial metrics, everybody attends that meeting and you go away. And that's kind of pack as much into it as possible. Rely upon documentation, and documentation doesn't have to be a 75-page memo, right? Documentation could just be, just record a video and put it on the chat, or use messaging. Just make sure that it's asynchronous, that I don't have to be on with you at the same time. You're in Sydney, you're in Melbourne, I'm in Naperville, and we're trying to make this synchronously, which is the only way to do these sorts of things. But not everything needs to be done this way. So we could do it offline. So I think those are things that have changed, and those are three of the things that I would recommend people start thinking about.
Oh, I love that. I think so many people listening, Abhi, will say, oh, thank goodness, someone who realizes that often meetings really suck. And I actually have a module in my Outcomes Over Hours program called Meeting Madness, because what I hear people say is, I have back-to-back meetings from 8 till 5, and my real work starts after that. And so the obvious question is, well, if that's your real work, what on earth are those meetings that you're attending during the day? So what advice on that? What advice would you gave some really practical things of, having a day where all your strategic initiatives can be updated, etc. Any other tips on how to minimize the meetings aside from the documentation as well? Anything else you'd recommend there? Because it's such a big issue for corporate leaders.
Yeah, and also I think, I've had this conversation with lots of people, and there's a reason why people have meetings, and we really need to start thinking about the root cause. I'll take accountability for some, right? So as a leader, you just said, and then people's real work become. The reality is, as the accountable leader, I actually don't have a real job. I mean, I don't get off a meeting and do anything or build anything. Maybe I'll read a PowerPoint deck, or maybe I'll look at my budget or whatever, but there's nothing waiting for me tomorrow that I have to commit, submit or code. So we as leaders, and we are the minority, so the minority in an organization, set the reality for meetings. So maybe we don't understand what is going on, and the only way we can understand it is by bringing everybody involved with the project and talk to us repeatedly, so we get to know, right? Or we don't actually know if our key projects that we have invested in, gone and told investors, are actually going well or not. And so we need a regular meeting to get updated, right? And I'm just looking at myself. And if you look at any organization, everybody has insecurities and aspirations. And in order for them to get control over those, they want to talk to somebody and have meetings, etc. So you get meetings piled on top of meetings piled on top. But the person who is actually doing the work, they're right. They're like, why am I on this meeting? Let me just do my job.
Yeah.
And I tell a lot of the engineers, it's like, well, it's really easy to criticize meetings. All of us want meetings to go away. But as an engineer, if your boss is worried about whether we're going to get something done that they've committed or not, and you have a better way to have them not have that fear, come up with it. Let them know.
Yeah.
Because meetings have become the enemy, and but there are true problems that people are trying to solve through meeting. Now, there are lots of meetings that are just routine. Everybody has to have a staff meeting. No, you don't have to have a staff meeting. It's really not needed, right? And so things like that would be very important. Just double click. Say, why are we having these meetings? Can we not have them because of something else? And I think as humans, we'll start figuring out by candid conversation saying, well, if I can get this information, I don't need this meeting.
Absolutely. And I love your practical advice that leaders should consider documentation. What type of asynchronous documentation can you have that actually it takes 2 minutes to create a video and post it versus an hour meeting of updates? Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And if you think about for leaders and thinking about moving forward for the next decade or beyond, what are the 2 to 3 skills that you think that leaders should be really doubling down on now that will be required to be really effective over the coming decade?
Yeah, the first one is listen. I think listening is probably the most underrated of leadership skills. Which means that, speaking of before meetings, right? Like you have to clear your calendar and you have to make time to catch up with people. And it's, either asking one-on-ones or just opening your diary and saying, well, if anybody wants to have this, or, just setting up skip levels and really just having conversations with people. So listening is really, really important. And these meetings are about listening, not about propaganda, not about, telling people what you think. It's really about listening to what people think. So I think that's very important. Now, that's a good thing of being remote because it's easier to put in 20 minutes here and say, hey, do you want to just catch up? I haven't, I think taking that feedback, knowing what you know from a company mission point of view, it is a leader's obligation to establish clarity of mission.
Yeah.
And it has to be clarity of mission. It can't be corporate contrived. It's, we're going to sell 75 of these and we're going to create this much revenue at this much margin, which means we can only spend this much money. You get this much, you get that much. And if, these 3 metrics are going this way, things are working. If they're not working that way, things are not working. It's simple as that. Send it out. And then communicate it in an omni-channel way. Yeah, those people who are 4 years in and have only worked remote, and you're sending them, Excel spreadsheet and a detailed PowerPoint and a documentation created using, olden time technology. They're kind of going, these are people who are on Instagram, they're on Snapchat, they're on Twitter, and their communication paradigms are very different. And then we also have people who are my age who've grown up the old way. And you send me a Snapchat, it's not, I feel like it's very informal. I can't take it seriously, right? And so leaders have to communicate in a very omni-channel way. Communicate the mission again. I don't care how many times you've done it, do it again. When people complain, you're starting to make progress. When people complain that you're being redundant and repetitive, you've started to make progress. You haven't actually gotten there. Measure success constantly. Hey, top line revenue, CAGR, margin, repeat, and then the key metrics, right? And put them everywhere. Put them in your Teams, put them in your Zoom, put them on your website. But if you have a company app, if you don't have a company app, think about it. Put it there. And then, but share stories in a digital way. Share stories about the young mother who was not taking care of herself when she should have been, and she has that realization. Share that story. Yeah. The young intern who made their way and is now running a business. Share their story. This has to be, unfortunately, as Instagram-like as possible, because that's how our brains are getting wired now. Short form video is how we consume a lot of information. So that's what I would do. 2 or 3 things you have to do. It's it's really it's really about imbibing, consecrating almost, and creating articulate vision, then communicate, and then keep getting feedback. I think that's the only thing leaders can do as they go forward.
That is brilliant. I think that omni-channel communication is something that hasn't come up before in these conversations that I've had. And as you're talking and saying you've got to make it in Instagram, like I was thinking about all the corporate newsletters I see. Oh. And how, if you think about, as you said, those people 3 to 4 years into their careers, who will be the people leading our companies in the next couple of decades, that's not at all how they focus, is it? That's a really great insight. I love also your focus on the clarity of the mission, and clarity is one of my favorite words. Actually, in my outcomes over our system, in my framework, I have it because it talks about how do you be effective, efficient, and energetic. And I say the energetic is looking after yourself. And so when you look after yourself, that's when you can get clarity of what are the most value added things for me to do in my role to add the value for my people, Absolutely. Customers, organization. But when you're exhausted, it's really hard to have clarity of mission Absolutely. To go forward. So I love that, Abhi.
Sure. Yeah. I'm glad you like it.
Amazing. And what is the best, most practical advice you've ever been given and acted on for working smarter?
As a leader, I think yeah, maybe I'll give you the principle of it, and then maybe I can make it practical later. So I think somebody told me that we get it all wrong when we talk about leadership. And leadership is actually about followership. So what kind of a leader are you if nobody's willing to follow you? So the first obligation of a leader to actually be entitled to that title, for lack of a better term, is that people are actually willing to follow you. Otherwise, you're just foisted upon people, you're just a dictator, or you're just a manager. You're not a leader, right? So it was very important when they told me that, leadership is about followership. Did you actually have anybody who will follow you, right? Mm-hmm. And then in the before times, you could show up in your suit and, you had these physical objects of leadership that allowed you to sort of build that followership, right? Now it's very difficult with without the access to traditional proximity-based behaviors. How do you get people to follow you? Now the good thing is that people want their work to feel like it matters, because by extension, then people also feel they matter if their work matters. And they are very willing. I am very willing to extend that to my leader. If I feel like my leader's work matters, my work matters to my leader, that means I matter. Yeah. And the extent that courtesy leaders say, because I matter, my leader is larger than life. They are, because they are very important. They matter a lot. And I follow somebody who matters a lot. That's followership. You have this already. Never take it for granted. Never, ever, ever take followership for granted. And that was the advice. And so the way I think about leadership is, why do these group of people choose me? Even though I've been hired, I get paid. Why do these group of people choose me to lead them, right? And so it's clear, what is it? Why does our work matter? Why does your work matter? And if we do this, how does it make a difference to the corporation or to the world? That's what you have to constantly focus on. If you have to resort to, well, I'm a SVP, or, I got this is, then you've lost it. Then you've not really, and also you can never break that promise. So you have to be willing to walk away. You have to be willing to almost say, look, I will much rather not work than actually lead people down a path that is inauthentic. That I think is very, very important. you don't burn out because you're being very clear to yourself, and there is no duality, that you're not being fake, and people can tell fake immediately.
Yeah.
And they don't burn out because they're no longer thinking about how many hours they're working. They're really focused on the mission and not letting themselves, everybody else, and their leader down, right? So this is what makes great teams, great platoons, great tribes, great teams work, is because they don't want to let anybody in that whole triumvirate down. And so I think that's kind of what I took away. And I'll give you an example from your part of the world. I mean, it's I see this. We don't have it here, but I see these hakas that people do in New Zealand, and they bring this energy that is about the battle or the game that is to come, but as a tribe. And then you see that at funerals, and you see that because it's an emotional energy of an investment in a collective, and people will do anything for that.
Yeah. Oh, and even you saying it, it's so inspiring hearing that. And I agree, people want to work for inspiring people where it's clear what matters and that their work matters and that they matter. And then you get the outcomes over hours. I love that take on working smarter, because often people focus on productivity tools versus, hang on, let's really raise it up a level. So thank you. That's really, really insightful. Well, Abhi, I'd love to finish off with some rapid fire questions. Are you up for it?
Sure.
Okay. What's the best purchase you've made under about $100 over the last few years?
I'm standing on it. It's a foam thing that for my standing desk. It really protects my feet and my knees. It's just a little foam thing that I stand on all day on my standing desk.
My mouth's open because I'm at a standing desk right now and I've never heard about it. So it just protects your joints. Do you know the brand by any chance?
I'll send it to you later. I'll send it to you later.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And see, I learned something and I will be going out to buy one now. What is the book that you've recommended or gifted most to other people?
There's a few. The one that I, tell most people to look at is, 7 Brief Lessons in Physics from Carlo Rovelli. It's a little small, tiny book that I normally have on my desk. I don't have right now. And it's the greatest theories in physics explained in large font, really small. I love it. I think everybody should read it.
Amazing. And what is the most fearless thing you've done in recent years?
Well, I've quit from a large 50 corporation. I've quit. I've fired myself from my own startup. I've quit. I feel like I don't want my work to define who I am, and when it becomes greater than my existence, then maybe it's fearful thing, but I would much rather strike out on my own and learn a new path.
Oh, amazing. And finally, to finish up, what does outcomes over hours mean to you?
I think I heard this from my father or my grandfather. I don't remember who, but they basically said that every life, can be measured 2 ways. It can be measured on the input, which is how many hours, how many minutes we get on this earth, or it can be measured in output, which is what did you do with that time? And that's what that means to me. Outcomes. We were put on this earth not with a finite duration of hours. We were put on this earth with the capability and the potential to create outcomes. And so that's what we should focus on. And if we do that, then, we'll find more hours.
Yeah. Abhi Dhar, it has been the biggest pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for being my guest on the Outcomes Over Hours show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.